They got caught last night in a conversation they never meant for you to find out about. And I need you to stop whatever you are doing right now. Because what I'm about to tell you is going to change the way you see everything. Every moment of silence, every cold shoulder, every smile they gave you that never quite reached their eyes. It's all going to make sense in the next few minutes. And I need you to be ready for that. Because the truth, the real truth of what was said about you when they thought no one was listening, is not what you've been telling yourself at night when the room goes quiet and your mind starts searching for answers. It is so much bigger than that. So stay with me. Don't go anywhere. Because this found you for a reason, and that reason is about to become very, very clear. Let me paint you exactly what happened. There is a group. You know this group. Maybe you were part of it once. Maybe you're still on the edges of it, watching from a distance, sensing something was wrong, but never quite being able to name it. Maybe you left. Or maybe they made sure you felt unwelcome until leaving felt like the only option left. But this group, these people, they have been talking about you. Not once, not casually, repeatedly, obsessively, in a way that tells me something very specific about where you sit in their minds. And trust me, where you sit is not where they want you to know you sit. Because here's the thing about people who talk about you behind your back. The volume of those conversations is directly proportional to how much you matter to them. People do not spend this much energy discussing someone they have moved on from. People do not circle back again and again to someone they consider irrelevant. The amount of time they have dedicated to conversations about you. This alone tells you everything you need to know about your power in this situation. But last night was different. Last night, the conversation crossed a line that none of them saw coming. And it started, like most dangerous things do, with someone saying too much. One of them slipped. And I need you to understand what I mean when I say slipped. Because I don't mean they made a small error. I mean the kind of slip where the truth comes out so fast and so raw that the room goes completely silent afterward. The kind of slip where the person who said it realizes immediately that they cannot take it back. The kind of slip that changes the entire dynamic of every relationship in that room in a single moment. Someone in that group, someone who has been performing loyalty to the others while privately holding something very different about you, said the truth out loud in front of everyone. And what they said about you, I need you to take a breath before I tell you this. What they said was this, that you were right, that you had been right from the beginning, that everything you saw, everything you said, every instinct that they told you was paranoia. Every time they made you feel like you were imagining things or being too sensitive or overreacting, all of it. You were right about all of it. And the silence that followed that admission, that silence is still sitting in that room right now like a living thing. Here's what I keep seeing when I tune into this energy. I keep seeing a table or a couch, some kind of gathering space where people feel safe enough to say things they normally keep controlled. And there is an energy in this space that is tense in a specific way. Not the tension of people who are angry at each other. The tension of people who are suddenly, uncomfortably, unavoidably aware that they have been on the wrong side of something. That is a very specific feeling. It's the feeling of realizing you were the villain in someone else's story while you were convinced you were the hero. And this group, they are sitting in that feeling right now. Some of them have been sitting in it since last night. Some of them haven't slept, not because they feel guilty, though some of them do, but because they are trying to figure out what this means, what the fallout is going to look like, who is going to say what to who, how to control a narrative that has officially slipped out of their control. Because here is what else was said in that room last night. When that first person admitted you were right, when that admission cracked the surface open, other things started coming out. Things that had been held tightly under carefully managed faces for a long time. Someone said they had always known. Let me say that again, because I need you to feel the full weight of it. Someone in that group said they had always known what was really happening with you. They had always known the truth of your situation. They had always known that the things being said about you, behind your back, to your face, in group chats you were never added to, were not the full picture. And they said nothing. They stayed quiet. They smiled and nodded and kept themselves comfortable inside that group because the cost of telling the truth felt too high. And last night, that cost caught up with them. Because silence has a way of accumulating interest. You can stay quiet for only so long before the weight of what you know starts to show on your face, in your choices, in the moments where you should speak and you don't. And this person has been carrying that weight for longer than you know. And last night it became too heavy, so they said it. They said, that person, meaning you, never deserved any of what happened. Not one single part of it. And the room fractured. Not loudly. Not with screaming or dramatic confrontation. It fractured quietly, the way ice cracks beneath the surface before it gives way. You could feel the relationships in that room shifting in real time. Alliances recalculating. People suddenly uncertain about who they are standing next to and whether that position is still safe. And I want you to really sit with what I just said. A room full of people who had organized themselves, whether consciously or not, around a shared story about you. And in one conversation, that story collapsed. Not because you did anything. Not because you showed up and forced a confrontation. Not because you said a single word. Simply because the truth has a way of surviving. No matter how many layers of silence get piled on top of it, your truth survived. Now I want to talk to you about something that is harder to hear, but more important than anything I've said so far. Because you might be sitting here feeling vindicated. And you should. You absolutely should. But there is a layer underneath the vindication that we need to address. Because if we don't address it, you're going to carry something forward that doesn't belong to you. Why did they do it? Why does a group of people dedicate this much energy to someone they claim doesn't matter? Why the conversations? Why the whisper networks? Why the careful, deliberate effort to control how others perceive you? Here is the answer. And it's simple, but the simplicity of it doesn't make it less devastating. They needed you to be small, not because you did anything wrong, not because there was something in you that deserved to be diminished, but because the size of who you actually are made, something in them feel insufficient. And human beings, most human beings, when faced with a choice between expanding themselves to meet someone else's level or pulling that person down to theirs, they will pull down every single time if they haven't done the internal work to choose differently. And this group had not done that work. So they built a story, a shared story about who you were that made their own limitations feel more comfortable. They needed you to be the problem so that they didn't have to be accountable for their own patterns. They needed you to be difficult so that their inability to handle you felt justified. They needed you to be wrong, consistently, reliably, publicly wrong, so that they could stay right. And for a while, maybe for a long while, it worked. Maybe there were moments where you started to believe the story too, where the sheer weight of everyone around you agreeing on a version of you started to feel more real than your own experience of yourself, where you sat alone at night and wondered if maybe they were right. Maybe you were too sensitive. Maybe you were too intense. Maybe you were the problem. I need you to hear me right now. That was not doubt. That was not self-awareness. That was the result of sustained psychological pressure from people who needed you to question yourself, because a version of you that trusts yourself was a version they could not control. And here is the thing about control. The moment you stop being controllable, the moment you stop responding to the pressure, the moment you go quiet and still and simply stop performing for their narrative, the entire architecture of what they built around you starts to shake. You did not destroy their group. Your simple, quiet refusal to keep shrinking did. And now I need to talk about you. Not them. Not the group. Not the conversation from last night, or the fallout that is still unfolding, or the relationships that will never recover from what was said in that room. You. Because here is what strikes me when I sit with your energy. Here is what I keep coming back to over and over again. You knew. You knew before the slip. You knew before the admission. You knew before anyone in that room had the courage to say out loud what they had all been quietly acknowledging for a long time. You felt it, that quiet, persistent, deeply uncomfortable knowing that something was being said, that something was being done, that something was happening in spaces where your name was being used as a currency you never gave anyone permission to spend. You felt it, and you were told you were imagining it. You felt it, and you were told you were being paranoid. You felt it, and you stayed anyway. Not because you were naive, not because you were weak, but because you were trying to give people the benefit of a doubt that they did not earn and had never deserved. That is not your failure. That is the most painful kind of loyalty. The kind you extend to people who are not extending it back. And I want to say something about that loyalty. I want to say something about the part of you that kept choosing to see the best in people who were not showing you their best. A lot of people would look at that and call it a flaw. A lot of people would say you should have seen it sooner, should have walked away faster, should have been less trusting, less open, less willing to believe in people who hadn't earned that belief. I don't see it that way. I have never seen it that way. What I see when I look at that quality in you, that stubborn, inconvenient, sometimes painful tendency to believe in people's capacity for more, is evidence of something rare. You were not built to be cynical. You were not built to close yourself off, to move through the world with walls up and assumptions locked in, to protect yourself by deciding in advance that people cannot be trusted. That is not who you are. And the fact that some people took advantage of that openness is not a reason to become someone you are not. It is a reason to become more discerning, more selective, more willing to reserve that beautiful, generous version of yourself for the people who have actually shown you they can handle it. And those people exist. They are not in that group. They are not in that room. They are not part of the conversation from last night, but they exist. And the space that is being cleared right now, as the truth surfaces, as the dynamics shift, as the architecture of that old story comes apart, that space is being cleared for them. Here is what I need you to take away from everything I've just told you. They got caught, not by you, not by some external force that intervened on your behalf. They got caught by the same thing that always catches people who build their foundations on dishonesty. The truth that you carried, that you held alone in silence while they performed certainty around you. That truth did not need you to defend it. It did not need you to argue for it or fight for it or convince anyone of it. It simply needed time. And last night, time ran out for them. And here's the part I need you to really hear. The conversation they had about you last night, the one that destroyed their group, that fractured their alliances, that left some of them unable to sleep. That conversation is not the end of their story with you. It is the end of your story with them. There is a difference, a very important one. Their story with you will continue for a long time. They will think about you. They will talk about you. Differently now, but still. They will measure themselves against the memory of how they treated you and what that cost them. Some of them will want to reach out. Some of them will want to apologize. Some of them will want to explain, to justify, to offer you a version of events that makes them more comfortable with their own role in what happened. You do not owe any of them a response. You do not owe them your time, your forgiveness, your attention, or your grace. Those things are yours. They are not currency to be spent on people who have already shown you exactly how they spend what you give them, what you owe yourself. The only debt that matters right now is this: the truth about who you are, not their version, not the story they needed you to be the villain of, not the diminished, reduced, carefully managed version of you that made their limitations more comfortable. The real version, the full version, the one that knew, the one that stayed too long out of loyalty, the one that held integrity in rooms where integrity was not the prevailing energy, the one that came through all of it, without becoming what they were. That version. You are allowed to claim it now, without waiting for their permission, without waiting for their acknowledgement, without waiting for one more person to finally, publicly admit that you were right. You were right. You have always known you were right. And now, finally, so does everyone else in that room. That is not the beginning of something you need to manage or respond to or prepare for. That is simply the world catching up to what you have always known about yourself. And where you go from here, who you let into the space that's been cleared, what you build in the silence that follows their collapse, how fully you allow yourself to step into the version of you that no longer needs to be protected by their approval. That is entirely, completely, beautifully yours. No one in that room gets a say in it. Not anymore. I love you. Stay safe. And please, do not shrink yourself one more day for people who were never going to be big enough to deserve you. That chapter is closed now. Everything from here is yours.